Hello Horror Hounds. Horror was big business in the 30s and 40s, thanks mainly to Universal Studios and their stable of classic monsters. And no name was bigger than Frankenstein, but even by the end of the 40s, his pull was waning, and he, along with Dracula, the Wolfman, the Mummy, were tied up in adventures with Abbott and Costello. And the 50s brought in a different kind of threat, a different kind of interest for audiences. Threats came from outer space or from atomic experimentation, creatures mutated by radiation. But then, towards the end of the 50s, in 1957, a little British studio called Hammer changed the game. Hammer Studios decided to bring a completely different sensibility to the horror genre. A dynamism, a modernism, a sexuality, and colour. It's hard to underestimate the impact of red blood splashing across skin and screen. But more important than all of that, after a success with the Quatermass experiment, Hammer Studios' project, The Curse of Frankenstein, was an exercise not only in budget limitation, but also an overriding desire to avoid litigation from Universal Studios on anything that might infringe on original material they brought to the screen with their adaptations of Mary Shelley's novel, long since in the public domain. Step forward scriptwriter Jimmy Sangster, a name familiar to fans of Hammer horror. His approach was very much guided by Hammer's limited budget, and those limitations made him streamline the plot from Shelley's novel. There's no more globe-trotting. There's no mob of bloodthirsty villagers that always seem to crop up in the Universal films with flaming torches leading to a cataclysmic explosion and a castle being blown up. So keeping most of the action inside Frankenstein's house not only adds to a sense of claustrophobia, it also displays a disparity there between the decadent, bright living quarters that are presented to society with their gatherings and soirees, and the dank, squalid laboratory hidden away from the eyes of the world behind a thick locked door, which could also, it be argued, represent this house that everyone's trapped in, the mind of our main protagonist, Baron Victor Frankenstein, the two sides of his personality, the public and the private, and also that something hidden away at the back here. There's something wrong. Sangster's script kept much of the focus of the film on Victor's descent into sociopathic behaviour, a corruption perhaps of a still brilliant mind, but a mind that's become so monomaniacal in the pursuit of a scientific ideal that I guess he considers himself completely beyond morality, a true sociopath. Cushing furnishes with his performance this brilliant, truly a genius character with a cool precision that he adorns with telling gestures and flourishes. The one that sticks in your mind most of all is when he absent-mindedly wipes blood, bright red blood, onto the pristine green lapel of his tailored jacket after he's just dismissively removed a substandard head from a body that he has a use for. It's very clear when you watch the film that Victor Frankenstein is a wronger. He is the villain, but you can't quite pinpoint when the wide-eyed and open-minded exuberance for scientific discovery slides into an obsession with no thought of consequence. But with each subsequent scene with Cushing, with each laboratory scene, with each business trip to procure parts for his work, Cushing subtly shifts further along the scale towards the more villainous extreme. And even the point when he's crossed that line, even though it's hard to place the line, probably his first murder is a Rubicon there. Even once he commits that murder, and he's brought you along with him so compellingly that you're never questioning why he's doing it. You don't need speeches from the character. Sangster's script doesn't need Victor to monologue because it's all there, and Cushing gives you everything you need to understand the man's thought process. It's also clinically and logically straightforward that you understand his madness. It's not even evil, it's just a complete amorality. It's a complete lack of a moral compass. Cushing's performance lifts that character off the pages, and he gives it a focus and intensity that effortlessly carries you through the first 50 minutes of the film. And although there are maybe pacing issues with this first attempt at a kind of mid-Victorian Gothic horror that Hammer definitely tightened up on in later films, you're never bored in the company of Victor Frankenstein. I never found myself looking at my watch wondering, well, when's the creature going to appear, and found myself surprised that it's only in the last half hour that there's even the merest whiff of a creature. So the creature doesn't make his presence felt until the final 30 minutes of the movie, less perhaps. And he's played by Christopher Lee. Before, I think it's safe to say, Hammer knew what they had. Before Dracula instantly made Lee a charismatic superstar. In an effort to avoid all comparisons with Karloff's performance and Jack Pierce's makeup for the Universal Frankenstein movies, this creature is even less eloquent, even less agile than its predecessor, which in and of itself was far less eloquent and precise and philosophical as Mary Shelley's creation. But don't think, though, that means Christopher Lee's performance is one of a lumbering idiocy, prone to physical violence. Lee creates a way of moving that speaks of the disparate parts he's being made of. His hands, which we know come from a separate source to his arms, dangle limply as though they're alien things on the end of these limbs. His legs seem to work independently, as if they maybe come from different sources. Lee uses his physique and his face to replace dialogue. He has no dialogue. And through these tools, he tells the story of a living being that has known nothing but a life of fear and agony. Less a man and more like a horrifically abused animal. And when we're reintroduced to him, because the creature is killed and then Victor just brings him back to life again. After his second resurrection and he's presented to Paul, there's a moment of awful shame where Lee, as the creature, tries to hide his fresh new scars from brain surgery that is absolutely heartbreaking. And a horrible thought struck me at that point about the 3 months Victor had spent with his newly resurrected creation. Paul thinks he's destroyed the creature, leaves, everything's safe. 3 months later comes back, haha, no, I just brought it back to life and I've been doing brain surgery on it. It was a damaged brain, Victor thinks, that turned it into a killer rather than a work of art. Do we honestly believe that Frankenstein would have gone to the bother of anaesthetising his creation for the rounds of brain surgery he was engaged in? At worst, I can absolutely see Victor operating on this creature while it's lucid and aware, viewing it just as material. At best, I can see Victor killing the creature, operating on it, bringing it back to life, viewing the results, and then repeating the process over and over to try and improve on his results. It's chilling. It's chilling to think of. The proto-elements of the other thing that Hammer brought to the table, this kind of bosomy sexuality, let's call it that, is there. It's there in proto form. Valerie Gaunt plays Justine the maid and Victor's lover, and then victim. Hazel Court plays Elizabeth, Victor's fiancée, with really not much to do other than looking damn fine. Women would get better roles later as Hammer refined their template, and Hammer glamour, as it's become known, is definitely an important ingredient in their cocktail of success. But right out of the gate here with Curse of Frankenstein, Hammer set a template that would see them rocket to success and would see new life, if you'll pardon the Frankensteinian pun, injected into the horror genre as a whole, and specifically these stable of classic and iconic characters that we all thought had had their day. But don't just take my word for it. As regular viewers will know, I like to round off these videos by giving alternate viewpoints from user reviews from the Internet Movie Database. I'm happy to be able to tell you that for all 6 Hammer Frankenstein movies, we will be hearing from channel favourite Jacob John Taylor 1. He has this to say about The Curse of Frankenstein. This is a great movie. This is a remake and it is great. Dr. Frankenstein creates a monster out of dead body parts. In this version, he robes graves. He kills people to use to make his monster. He uses the monster to kill people when it is to his advantage. Some young might think because a movie is old, it is not scary. And they would be wrong. This is one of the scariest movies ever made. This movie has great storyline. It also has great acting. It also has great special effects. This movie is based on one of the best horror stories ever told. And it is one of the best horror movies ever made. It is a must-see. This is one of the best remakes ever. Join us next time for Revenge of Frankenstein.